So I want to continue my series on selling and getting people to trust you, to win people over to buy from you. So the first one was a gentleman from Ilorin. His name was Basambo Abdul Rahim. That's actually his real name. Though I have no clue where he is now, but he's a farm business owner, and he wanted my feed formulation handbook and the software. So he found, I think, one of my videos and called me up from Ilorin. Quite often actually. If they called me up and said they were interested, I would say, okay, right, I need to ask you a few questions, and then I would do that, and then we'd have a conversation. Whatever. What happened on that day was, after I asked him all my questions, I then said, did he have any questions to ask me? And he said, how do we make this happen? The software, he said, is 12.5. I said, yes. Okay, so how do I get it? And I said, okay, well, basically I'll send you details of my account and you send the payment in, and then I'll send you the product. He said, how? I said, I'm sending it to you through email. You're going to get it through email. Now, some people do get it. They request for it in print form. I mentioned Ben Osh from based in Port Harcourt, who had purchased, that was I think in 2008, he had purchased the software and handbook, but requested that it be delivered to him on DVD. So I actually had to arrange for it to be bound onto a DVD, and then he wanted the handbook in printed form, so I'd actually arranged to print it. He paid for that, and the whole thing then I gave to a friend who turned out to be going to Port Harcourt at that time. It was a very interesting story, because that friend of mine, Ebenezer, was also somebody, he lives in Port Harcourt today, by the way, he's married there, but at that time he was based in Lagos running a business center. We were friends, and it was in his business center I printed the handbook, you see. So he knew how I started, he knew the struggles I was going through, he knew the product, he had interacted with me extensively, knew how to use my software. And so when the issue came up, he said, oh, I'm going to Port Harcourt. And I said, okay. I called Ben Osionya and told him, look, I've got somebody coming to Port Harcourt. This can save you some money by way of delivery. So he'll drop it off on my behalf, and he also knows how to use my product. He'll teach you how to use it. And that was how it happened. Life is very interesting. It is said that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Sometimes you just have to put in the work, make sure you're ready, so that when the opportunity shows up, you don't have to do any running around, you just simply take advantage of it. That was what happened. So I told him about that, and I thought that would make it easier for him, but I understood also that he had no idea who I was, and I could as well be lying. So he then said, and I'm actually reading out his exact words. He said, but you should, he said it Nigerian way, but now, I'm in Ilorin and you are in Lagos. How do I get the bundle after I paid for it? Paid into your account? And I said, I just told you, people who paid me, I send them a link, or I send it in print, whichever in physical form, whichever version of it you want. And he said, but this is Nigeria now. How can I be sure you will send it? Believe me. Think about it. You're having a conversation with somebody that's lasting like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you think you've told this guy everything. It's not the first time I was doing it. I'd had conversations like that with so many people. I'd been making sales for a long time, and every once in a while this will happen. So it was always something that threw me off, but I always remembered that I couldn't blame those people that were expressing those sentiments, because every now and then too, we do hear that people get ripped off, duped and all that. So we do know it's true, especially in our social space here in Nigeria. So I told him, I said, look, forget it. This thing I've told you, the truth of the matter is that this is what I do. I cannot afford, because of 12,000 naira, to destroy a brand that I intend to kind of be my mouthpiece and promote my business till I die. This is something that I'm in for the long haul, and I intend to make sure that I'm only recognized for doing what I promise, and not for taking advantage of people and running away and changing my phone numbers and things like that. Anyway, the more I spoke to him, the more it sounded like I was trying to put him under pressure to buy. So I realized I was doing the wrong thing. So I stopped. I said, listen, what do you want to do? And he said, well, let me get back to you. He never did. Until today, I've not heard from him. You must understand, some people will think of the money and say, you know what, I can afford to lose this money. Don't worry, I'll send it. If you don't send me the product, no problem. It's small money. Some people think, man, this is all I have. I can't afford to get it wrong. What if this guy is one of those guys that just takes people's money and doesn't deliver? Man, I can't take the risk. So when you're a salesman, you've got to understand that the best thing you need to do is make sure you've done your job, prepare all your marketing in such a way that you don't have any second thoughts or regrets that, oh, I could have added this, I could have added that. Make sure your marketing is done in a way that the people you are going to have the sales conversations with will have received the full impact of your marketing. All the things you would have loved for them to experience and to hear and to see, you would have made sure that they encounter it, whether before, during, or after your interaction, so that you don't have yourself wondering, what if I had done this, would I have done that? That's one of the things I used to do for myself, because I realized that there was a time when I first started, I was losing sales a lot, and I kept asking myself, what is it I'm this? Then I realized I had to be able to make such a compelling offer in such a comprehensive manner that the people that were going to interact with my marketing resources would be able to see the full ramification of what the benefits were, and they would really not be unaware of anything else that I had to offer. In that way, I would be sure that I didn't have to go back or wonder if I could have gone back to say more. So the minute I got to a point with the client where he was no longer ready to buy, my mind was also clear that I didn't have to chase. You don't chase. In web marketing, if you want to succeed, you very rarely have to really chase. What you could do is follow up, and you do that intelligently. You watch the body language, but most of the time you don't really have to do all of that, because if you've done your homework right, all the interaction you have during the sales conversation will be enough to keep it going, and that person is going to be able to be the one that will reach out to you later on. So I had to let go. Then I had another experience in which I lost a sale like that, and it has happened over the years. It's just that I can tell you that for the inquiries I make, if I get 10 inquiries about my product, believe me, my conversion rate was about 65 to 70%. Believe me. Once they call me, man, there's a 60 to 70% chance that I'm going to close that sale. That's how powerful the marketing I've done before they reach out to me is. And by the time I now add mine by way of one-on-one sales conversation, it's usually very compelling. Most people buy, but not all, and that shows that I'm a human being. I'm not perfect, but I mean, think about it: 60 to 70% success rate. That is huge, So this guy was from Cameroon. He had been talking with me on email for a while, and it was interesting because I actually thought I had won him over. You understand? We had exchanged several messages, and eventually he called me up. I said he should call me because I always want to do that. I always want that phone call. I have found in certain instances that I'll be sharing emails with the person who is actually in the same country as you and claiming to be in another country. Our Yahoo boys. That has happened to me. So luckily I didn't get carried away, and I was able to unmask the person. But the point I'm making is that sometimes it happens, so you've got to be alert to that. So one of the things I did was to say, you know what, call me. It's also my way of testing. A person that wants to buy something from me that's worth $65 to $100, sometimes more, sometimes as much as $375, depending on the product, who refuses to make a phone call that's going to cost him or her less than $1 or $2, that kind of person can definitely not buy the product. If you cannot take that, then I can't take you seriously, basically. So this guy from Cameroon calls me, and we eventually have our conversation, and it gets to the issue of the sale. He never got back to me. He said he would. I sent him all the details, but he never got back, and he stayed on my mailing list, and I kept thinking he would buy. He never did. But by the time I migrated everybody onto my WhatsApp groups, he was also there, and I put him on my Facebook groups as well, the open groups, and he added me as a friend on Facebook, and he didn't actually behave right. Eventually I had to block him. Something was not right about him later on, something where, I don't know, maybe his business failed or something. He just became extremely bitter, and he would post some very disrespectful stuff on my post. Not like he was calling into question my character or anything, but it was just more like he just had negative things to say all the time in his own contributions. So I didn't want someone like that with negativity in my space, so I just had to block him. But I didn't even know if he was still doing farm business then. But that's another one. Now, subsequently, there's one of so many stories of successful selling, and this one has to do with a guy in Ibadan. He had been in Lagos with a big company, to be specific, PZ Cousins, and when he was going to retire, he had told me he wanted to buy my software. So by the time he retired to Ibadan, he then reached out to me, and he tried to buy the product. but he wasn't convinced. Just like all the other people, he asked me so many questions. Okay, he asked me for my office address. By the time he called me, and he wanted to say, okay, at least I know where the office is. And I said, oh boy, I don't use an office. And he said that he will not be able to confidently send me money if I did not have an office. And I said, well, sorry, I cannot, because of you, go and get an office. It doesn't make economic sense for me to have an office to sell what I sell, because then my overheads will be way too much, because the solutions I offer cannot sustain the use of an office given the kind of rates they charge for rental space in this part of the world. And I said, look, I've been doing this for several years now, and people have bought from me in this manner. Well, he said, well, he just didn't like it. He couldn't accept that. So what he did was say, okay, he would think about it and get back to me. He never did. But one thing I noticed was that he stayed, again, like others, he stayed subscribed to my newsletter. And that's why I tell people all the time, try and be consistent. Look at me saying try and be consistent. I've been so busy with client work because I'm having more web marketing clients now, much more web marketing clients now, and it's getting tougher and tougher to create content. But I have content that I can publish. The only thing is that I'm watching the behavior of particularly my subscribers on YouTube and the way I'm getting subscriptions. I'm also watching the behavior of my readers on my blogs, and I'm trying to use this to make an intelligent decision about what kind of content I will focus more on creating, because I'm having a bit of a battle deciding. I'm like 80% decided now that I'm going to be doing more content on men rights protection advocacy, but I don't want to abandon, because I have a brand that I've established so well, and I've built such a client base that I'm actually able to just do a lot of data mining with my existing client base. But the creation of new marketing content, to promote my farm business support services, is something I'm having to really look at based on what is happening in the market, in the economy now. Things are tough for farm business owners. I've tried to help some of them to explore the possibility of using live protein like black soldier fly farming and all that. And I'm watching and I'm listening to feedback from them. Many of them are frustrated by the economy. The government's decisions the government policies are not helping them. The exchange rate is making things worse. So many of these farmers are really trying to just kind of ride the storm into the new year. So they're not exactly looking to invest in things like software solutions right now. But many of them are looking for marketing ideas, variable cost reduction ideas and things like that. So I'm doing more videos along those lines, helping them to sell, helping them to develop web marketing systems and things like that. That's why you're listening to this, because I'm trying to talk about how to sell, how to find buyers, how to present your marketing content and all of that. Then with regard to the actual farm support stuff, I'm slowing down on that because I've not seen too much demand for that. And I'm thinking to myself, it's only when people are able to make enough money that they'll be able to invest on that. So much as I'm still doing all that, I'm doing that on a smaller scale. All right, so that's the situation now. But what I'm saying is that the consistency I demonstrated in churning out my newsletter was what led the Ibadan man. I kept sending out my newsletter every week, like I was doing. I would post a blog and all of that. And eventually one day I was just driving. I was going from Ojudubega area to Ikeja. I will never forget, around Omole phase 1, my phone rang. So I parked and took the call. And I parked and took the call, by the way, because I noticed it was him. Because what I do is, once a person has called me before, made an inquiry, there's a way I kind of label the different phone numbers. It depends on what stage you are in my sales funnel. So I knew straight away this was somebody that had made an inquiry, hadn't bought, but that who I was still believing would be able to come back later on. So there's where I saved the name. So I took the call, and I knew it was him, by the way. I recall literally all the people who have made inquiries. It's just, we all have our gifts. That's just a gift I have. And so he called me and then commended me on the edition of newsletter I just sent out before I started driving, which was interesting because I was using a BlackBerry then. I didn't know he was still there. So I said, oh wow, that's good. So he said, yeah, I've been following your stuff. It's very interesting. Please send me your account details. And that was it. That was how he became my client. And over the course of several years, he would go from running a poultry layer farm to actually starting a hatchery of his own and all that. Sad to say, like I said, the coronavirus pandemic really affected a lot of people. He was one of them. Things went tough. But that was like between 2008 2020. You can see how many years that was. We really maintained quite a good relationship. But the irony, we never actually met each other, but he did make that purchase. And what I'm trying to say is that the reason why I was able to make that sale to him was because for a 3-year period after he made his first phone call to me, for a 3-year period, I consistently sent out, of course, not like clockwork, not like every single week. I would have some off days, but generally I stayed visible. I stayed in touch through my newsletter, which he had subscribed to. So he saw that I was real, because I couldn't spend 3 years waiting for someone that's going to send me 12,500 or 20,500. It was clear to him that this guy is in it for the long haul, and he saw that I was serious about what I was doing. If I took myself that seriously, then he knew that he could take a risk with me, and that was it. He needed it anyway, and he said he had checked, and I kept coming up in the Google searches, so he knew he needed to get it from me, and that was how I made the sale. So that consistency, okay, the focus on hard work of showing up every time really helped me to make the sale, and it can help you too as well. So that's what I recommend to you. There are so many other stories of sales experiences I've had, selling experiences I've had, that I'm going to share with you, but I feel that this one, in which I talk about 2 that failed and the objections that those people that have refused to buy gave me, and the one that eventually succeeded, and what the reason it was that it succeeded, I think that compare and contrast situation should give you a good idea of how to go about preparing your marketing messages and launching your marketing campaigns. It's not something that can happen overnight, and our experiences will always be different from one another, but the truth is, so long as you have useful value to offer by way of product or service, and so long as you are willing to dedicate yourself to improving your marketing messages and refining them, and making sure you're consistent in delivering those marketing messages to the right audience using the right platforms, you cannot fail. That's the truth. So I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, reach out to me using the contact details on the screen. I wish you well.